Aksum, the heart of our empire, the cradle of Ethiopian civilization and culture since antiquity. Even so, every time our caravan stops here to sell its wares and acquire necessities for the village, the city seems less grand. More roofs need thatching, less shops are open, and even the shouts of the hawkers are ever so slightly less audible. My son Daniel doesn't notice, of course. For his 12th birthday, I promised that he could travel with the yearly caravan and see Aksum for himself. Ever since we entered the city, the boy has stared in awe at every building. The city is indeed a marvelous sight for a country lad living in the northern highlands. As we passed a temple, Daniel abruptly stopped. "Father," he whispered, his eyes fixed on the golden curtains. "Have you ever seen such a treasure? Why does nobody guard it? Are they not afraid of thieves?" I could not help but smile before replying. "Why hire strong-arms when even the queen dares not take them, my son?" A deep frown creased Daniel's brow. "Don't you lie to me, father. Surely a queen can do whatever she wishes." The boy apparently did not know the story of his ruler yet. That needed to change. "Sit down, son," I responded, directing Daniel to the stairs of the temple. 40 years ago, when our queen Yodit was but a princess, she discovered the very reason why those curtains do not need any guards. The boy sat down, leaning close to hear the beginning of what was sure to be a truly wondrous story. Yodit was truly beautiful. Every lord in the empire contended for her hand, much to the displeasure of Gidajan, her nephew and the heir to the throne. Gidajan devised a plan to be rid of her, and the night he stole the golden curtains and hid them in her room. When the palace guard discovered the treasure, she was locked in the deepest cells. Daniel gasped loudly, but quickly covered his mouth and urged me to go on. Luckily, there were some who refused to believe the accusations. One loyal captain, named Samuel, helped her escape through a secret tunnel. As long as she stayed in the Aksumite Empire, Yodit would never be safe from Prince Gidajan. Her journey had merely begun. Daniel laughed with joy. "I knew Yodit would escape Prince Gidajan." After a few seconds, his face became more serious. "But how did she become queen if she left Ethiopia, father?" he finally asked. "Indeed, a good question, Daniel, but we must be going," I responded while lifting him up. "The sun is already descending. We still need to visit the market. Mother will not be pleased if we return to the village without a gift for her. If you help me find one, I will tell you how Yodit fared in exile." That promise put the smile back on the lad's face. Despite the late hour, the market of Aksum was still crowded. Vendors shouted from several wooden stalls, describing their goods. Bolts of silk from the Far East, olibanum, incense from Arabia, bracelets made from Egyptian glass, our own Ethiopian ivory. Products from all over the world have been exchanged in the city since ancient times. At every stall, Daniel was enthralled by some exotic item he had never seen before. Not a very good situation to start bargaining, but I could not spoil his mood just to save a few coins. In the end, we settled on some beautiful golden earrings for Mother. She had always liked jewelry. "Father," Daniel asked me just after the purchase, "you promised to tell me the story of Yodit's exile once we bought a present for Mother." So there we were, sitting on some low wall next to a shop. I was tired from browsing all of the stalls, but a man should keep his word, especially to his son. Sighing, I began. Yodit traveled north for many years, searching for someone who could help her seek revenge for the humiliation she had suffered at the hands of Gidajan. Eventually, when making camp near the border of Egypt, a princess heard a rumor that perhaps presented the opportunity she had been awaiting. The Syrian prince, Zenobis, was traveling the region looking for a suitable bride. But how could she, an exiled princess, convince such a powerful man? Of course, Zenobis was impressed by Yodit's achievements. He went looking for this famous princess and asked her to marry him. I concluded. Smiling broadly, Daniel responded. Queen Yodit is truly a strong woman, father. But how did she... I quickly raised my hand to stop him. No, son. No more questions now. It will soon be dark. We need to return to the inn. A meal will do us both much good. Daniel looked disappointed. My, the boy was fond of this story. Perhaps I'll tell you about one of her great victories before going to bed. I conceded before leaving the market. The trade mission in Aksum was quite successful. I sold all of my grain and bought some casks of wine, olive oil, and spices. Those goods would be sure to fetch a good price at home. Perhaps I will even be able to afford another cow. The door opened with a loud creak as Daniel returned from checking on the camels. I looked up from the accounts and rubbed my eyes, tired from reading by the light of a single candle. Everything all right with the camels? I said to greet the boy. He only nodded, so I continued. Perhaps we should go to bed. The caravan will leave early tomorrow. We have a long way back home. Daniel barely suppressed a yawn before answering. I am not really tired, father, but since you said you would tell a bedtime story about Yodit, I might as well go to sleep early. The room was decent and clean, but small. There was only one bed for both of us, as renting 2 rooms in the city would have been expensive. I took my shirt off and lay down next to Daniel before resuming the story. After marrying Prince Zenobis, Yodit had to be patient for her vengeance. Her husband had to become king and build a larger army if they ever were to defeat the mighty Aksumite Empire. The boy suppressed another yawn, but then turned his head to listen closely. 5 years had passed since Zenobis had taken the throne when Yodit learned that the Aksumite king, Dagnajan, was planning a military expedition to the east. If she could send an elite force to ambush and kill Dagnajan, the Aksumite Empire would be severely crippled. A daring but promising plan. When the news of Dagnajan's death reached the city of Aksum, both of his sons tried to seize the throne for themselves. A civil war broke out, and the once so mighty empire began to crumble. Of course, Yodit. A soft snoring drew my attention to Daniel. The lad was already sleeping. Outside the northern gate, the camels groaned, irritated by the traders mounting the animals to begin the long journey back to the Ethiopian highlands. Daniel was already in the saddle, keeping a firm hand on the reins to avoid the camel from wandering off. He looked eager to return home. Drivers urged their animals forward with loud shouts and cracking whips. Slowly, the long-stretched caravan began to move. As I took my place next to my son, the sun slowly began to rise above the hills. Not far from the gate, we passed a field of great stelae. Some stood tall, reaching for the sky, but most lay toppled, their pieces scattered over the ground. "Father," Daniel asked, looking up at the towering stelae. "When we entered the city, you told me that these stones marked the graves of ancient kings. Do you think Dagnajan is buried here as well?" I shook my head while answering. "No, my son. Those kings are long dead. Christian kings never used stelae to mark their burial place. Besides, the body of Dagnajan was never recovered. His 2 sons were far too busy trying to slay each other." "So you told me last night," Daniel replied, suddenly remembering yesterday's story. "A perfect opportunity for Yodit to strike. Oh, father, tell me all about it." I shifted my weight to sit more comfortably in the saddle before beginning. While the Aksumite Empire was divided in civil war between the brothers, Yodit ordered a fleet to be built. An invading force would cross the Red Sea and strike hard at Massawa, the most important harbor of the empire. Although Gidajan had managed to kill his brother and take the throne in the meantime, he had also lost the north to Yodit. Soon she would advance to the capital for the final battle. Daniel whistled through his teeth as I finished. "That must have been an exciting time to be alive, father!" he exclaimed in admiration. Before I could dispel his youthful naivete about warfare, shouts arose from the front of the caravan to stop for the night. Had I actually spoken for the entire day? The caravan had stopped at the top of a hill after a long day of traveling. The setting sun cast an orange light on the city of Aksum in the valley below. Some merchants sat around the campfire, sharing wineskins and roasting a goat. Others were already pitching their tents. Up here, the nights could be very cold. "It's strange how the city looks so small from above, as if I could pick it up with one hand," Daniel remarked. Lost in my thoughts, I had not heard the boy return from watering and feeding our camels. "Wait until you get back home, son, for our village will look smaller still," I replied, smiling. "Come, let us join the campfire and have some dinner. I am starving." Daniel had just finished his portion of goat. "Father, would you finally tell me how Yodit became queen of Aksum?" he requested. Wiping some grease from my chin, I began to protest. Before I could finish, however, Tariku, an old, lean merchant with white hair, stood up. He stared fiercely at Daniel with his one eye.
"So, you want to hear about our good queen, lad?"
he asked in his leathery voice. All of the men around the fire were silent, and Daniel shifted nervously beside me. I gave his hand a squeeze to comfort him. "Tariku fought against Yodit's troops in Aksum," I whispered to my son. Daniel could only nod to the one-eyed man.
30 years ago,
Tariku began solemnly,
I was patrolling the northern hills of Aksum when suddenly I saw a sea of banners in the distance. The sun reflected upon rows of armored men. Yodit had finally arrived to destroy the cradle of Ethiopian civilization. I shivered, for her fury was legendary. I saw how Gidajan finally fell, his body covered with blood. He was wrong to kill his brother, yes, but he was the rightful heir to the throne.
Tariku was almost shouting, his body shaking with anger. After some silence, he continued in a soft voice.
I tried to defend my homeland from disaster and lost my eye for it. A small price for such an honor. Now you remember this well, boy,
he implored, looking directly at Daniel.
Yodit's rise to the throne was not some glorious adventure. It was a bloody mess.
The old man leaned back, sighing. Glancing at my son, I noticed that he suddenly seemed older than he had this morning. Nobody dared to whisper another word.